What up, people? It's me, Manny, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite movie that stars the late, great, and legendary Robin Williams. Not only is it my favorite movie of his, it's also one of my favorite movies of all time. And this year, in 2023, it celebrates its 30th anniversary since it got released. And I'm talking about none other than Mrs. Doubtfire. Yeah, dude looks like a lady! Oh, that was terrible. I'm sorry. I promise I won't do that again. Actually, I can't make that promise. I'm probably gonna do it again. Now, I'm a little bit late to the party because a lot of the bigger YouTube channels like the Nostalgia Critic already talked about this movie for its 30th year anniversary. But that's not gonna stop me from talking about it because I love this movie so much. Now, why do I love this movie so much? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's discuss.
La 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 la. A te fortuna, non mancherà.
Mrs. Doubtfire was released on November 24th, 1993, and it was directed by Chris Columbus, who also directed Home Alone and Home Alone 2: Lost in New York, two movies that I love very much. He also directed the first two Harry Potter movies, which I am not a fan of. Not just the movies, but the whole book series. Yeah, I never got into Harry Potter, so I don't care for those. But the Universal Studios ride is fun. But anyways, like I said, there's a good amount of reviews on this movie already, especially for its 30th year anniversary. So, story, quickly, spoiler warning. Daniel Hillard, who is played by Robin Williams, is a voice actor living in San Francisco. He quits his job when he sees that the cartoon he's doing voice work for starts smoking. He then goes to pick up his three children, who are 14-year-old Lydia, 12-year-old Christopher, and 5-year-old Natalie. Daniel then throws a big-ass crazy birthday party for Chris, despite him having bad grades. All that commotion makes the neighbor call Daniel's wife, Miranda, played by Sally Field. She leaves work early and gets home and is absolutely pissed at what she sees. This is the last straw, as Miranda now wants a divorce.
It's over! It's over!
Miranda gets custody of the kids, which devastates Daniel as he wants to spend more time with them, not just on weekends. One day, when Miranda picks up their kids from Daniel's beat-up apartment, he sees she's looking for a housekeeper. So while Miranda's not looking, Daniel takes her newspaper ad and puts the wrong phone number. So he calls her as all these crazy people, since, you know, he's a voice actor and can change his voice a lot, until he finally calls her as Mrs. Doubtfire and lands an interview. He came up with the name Mrs. Doubtfire on the spot thanks to this newspaper here, and her first name is Euphigenia. I'm pretty sure I said that right. Daniel then goes to Frank, who is his brother and a makeup artist, to turn him into an old British woman with makeup and prosthetics. He then shows up and impresses Miranda and gets the job. Everyone except for Lydia likes Mrs. Doubtfire, but eventually Lydia too warms up to her. Miranda then starts dating an old flame named Stu, played by Pierce Brosnan. And Daniel doesn't like this one bit, as it looks like Stu is winning over his entire family. So he sabotages him whenever he can. Anyways, one day, Chris walks in on Mrs. Doubtfire peeing standing up and sees everything. This might be considered offensive today.
He's gonna get it in the balls! Yeah! She's got him? She's got everything.
These other jokes too.
I don't work with the males, cause I used to be one.
Other than that, there's not many offensive jokes in here. It's just the times have changed a bit, so not me, but maybe other people might find it questionable. But anyways, after Chris and Lydia freak out for a bit, Mrs. Doubtfire reveals herself or himself as their dad, and they promise not to tell their mom or little Natty. Now let's skip to the part where Daniel is playing with these dinosaur toys in his new job at this TV station, and the CEO, Mr. Lundy, walks in and catches him in the act, but he's actually very pleased by what he saw. So Mr. Lundy sets up a meeting with Daniel at this restaurant, but on the same day that he's supposed to go as Mrs. Doubtfire to the same restaurant for Miranda's birthday. And then hilarity ensues. But then Daniel puts some pepper on Stu's plate and Stu starts to choke.
Oh no, I killed the bastard.
So Mrs. Doubtfire comes to the rescue and does the Heimlich maneuver on him and saves his life, even though he caused this. But yes, his mask peels off and Miranda discovers his true identity, and my god, she is pissed.
The whole time you were. The whole time?
A perfect reaction through all the emotions. Skipping ahead, the judge is very disturbed by Daniel's behavior. So now he can only see his kids while being supervised. I mean, he's lucky he didn't go to jail. If we were to hear about this on the news, we would think the person is crazy. But since it's a movie and we saw how much he loves his kids and wants to spend time with them, we definitely sympathize with him. I guess only Robin Williams could get away with this. Still, Daniel is very heartbroken by this. But Mr. Lundy did give Daniel his own show as Mrs. Doubtfire. And Miranda realizes that things were better when Mrs. Doubtfire was around, meaning that things were better when Daniel was around. So she arranges that they have joint custody and he gets to take the kids home after school. The movie ends with Mrs. Doubtfire in her show reading a letter from a little girl whose parents have separated. And basically she says that even though her parents are not together, that they still love her very much. The end. Now, the first praise I gotta give this movie is that Miranda and Daniel do not end up back together in the end. And that is the best ending because sadly in the real world, a lot of parents do end up in divorce and do not get back together. And honestly, sometimes it is better when the parents do separate instead of staying together in such a toxic environment that will make the kids' lives a living hell. Yeah, you just don't see many endings like that, especially back then. By the time I was able to remember stuff, my parents were not together, and as I got older, I really appreciated that because they were much better apart. So again, big props to this movie for not sticking to a cliche, even though that was almost the case. Yes, in the original script, Daniel and Miranda got back together.
The only unrealistic thing was initially early on is there was a lot of pressure that the family should stay together, that they should get, the marriage works out, which most family therapists would say is the most dangerous thing to do to a child if you're going through a divorce or a separation.
There were several drafts of the script before I got involved, and the biggest problem was Daniel Hillard and Miranda got back together at the end of the picture.
And this is why rewrites are important. Now, this movie is a perfect blend of drama and comedy. When it comes to the marriage issues of Daniel and Miranda, it is taken very seriously and how it affects the kids. But then you have your moments of Robin Williams' comedic greatness. And yes, to this day, this movie still makes me laugh. For the sake of time, I'll just mention this part right here, where the social worker catches him as Mrs. Doubtfire. So he lies and says that he is the sister of Daniel. So now he has to change between himself and Mrs. Doubtfire, and it's f***ing hilarious. And this part with the mask, oh my god.
Oh,
Makes me laugh every frickin' time. And it's been said millions of times, but Robin Williams' performance here is top tier. He's great as Daniel and even more amazing as Mrs. Doubtfire. Like, Mrs. Doubtfire feels like an actual person. And not just his performance, but the makeup too. It still holds up today. And it looks so good that when Robin Williams went up to the 3 actors who played his kids as Mrs. Doubtfire for the first time, they didn't even recognize that it was Robin Williams. So I'm not surprised they won the Academy Award for Best Makeup. Well deserved. Now trust me when I say the whole cast did great here. I can't go through all of them, but one person I have to talk about is Sally Field. She did a great job here with the serious moments, but she also had a few funny moments herself. Now I never really thought this, but some people think that she was like a villain or like too much of a party pooper. But no, she has every right to be upset and fed up with this marriage, where Daniel just doesn't listen to her and does not take things seriously, while she's always working, doesn't get to spend enough time with her kids, while Daniel here is quitting jobs on a whim. Basically, she's justified in how she feels. She's not a villain. And you know what? Neither is Stu. He's actually a good guy that cares for Miranda and cares about her kids. And it looks like they were gonna make him the cliche villain, but thank God they changed that. This movie taking the more realistic approach is what makes it so great. God, I love this movie. Another of my favorite scenes here is when Miranda tells Mrs. Doubtfire why she got a divorce from Daniel, and he finally realizes what he did wrong.
He never knew, but so many nights I just cried myself to sleep.
I really wish I could play the whole scene here, but unfortunately, copyright strikes, you know. But anyways, there's also a lot of deleted scenes, like the spelling bee scene, and this part right here where the washing machine goes crazy, and a whole subplot where Daniel, as Mrs. Doubtfire, convinces his neighbor that he's not very fond of to water her plants with dog piss. Now, honestly, I think the movie is great as it is. It didn't really need these scenes. But there is this one scene after the restaurant reveal where Daniel comes back home and has another argument with Miranda. They fight as the kids watch from the stairs, and they just had enough and they tell their parents that they hate them, making them realize what they're doing to the kids with their toxic behavior. This scene brought a tear to my eye. These deleted scenes are very good. Like, you could put them back in the movie and it'll enhance it, but you could also take the movie as is and it's still great. But anyways, the movie's pacing is nearly perfect. If I had to nitpick, I would say that the restaurant scene towards the end kind of comes very abruptly. Like, oh crap, the movie's about to end. But that's probably because I love this movie so much, I wanted to keep going a bit longer. Even though there's a lot of deleted scenes, so maybe that caused it. You know what? Forget it. It's great. It's good as is. Director Chris Columbus recently said that Robin Williams improvised so much on Mrs. Doubtfire that 2 million feet of film was shot, and the director still has 972 boxes full of outtakes and more, and that he would like to make a documentary of this, and that with all that footage he could make an R-rated version and an NC-17 version of Mrs. Doubtfire.
There is the PG version, the PG-13 version, the R version, the NC-17 version, and they're all, and the NC-17 version is the best. It is the funniest. It's a bit rough.
Very interesting, but yes, I would love to watch that documentary. Also, I know physical media is dying, but I would love a 4K Steelbook edition of Mrs. Doubtfire. Also, Mrs. Doubtfire is based on a book named Madame Doubtfire that got released in 1987. And of course, there's some differences between the book and the movie, like Daniel being a nude model for an amateur art class, and also being an excellent gardener, and his kids almost immediately finding out that he is Madame Doubtfire. And it looks like that deleted scene that I was talking about earlier, where the kids say they hate their parents after they have a big fight, is in the book. And in the end, Miranda hires Daniel as a gardener so he could spend more time with the kids. So yeah, that's all I got from the Wikipedia page. Interesting. Also, one of the main things I love about the story in this movie is how Daniel became a better dad when he became Mrs. Doubtfire. He made everybody's lives better, and it took him taking the role of Mrs. Doubtfire to prove that. But at the end of the day, it was him. So yes, it was in him the whole time.
Who needs a husband when I've got you?
Surely you don't mean that, dear.
Well,
Oh, that's so sweet.
All he had to do was take things a little bit more serious and try a bit harder, like him cooking dinner. He sucked at first, but look how good he got. Also, I do remember when I went to the theaters to watch this movie. I had to be like 5 years old, and I don't remember if my dad came with us, but I definitely went with my mom. Yes, both my parents would still hang out every so often. Anyways, I also remember bringing my favorite Ninja Turtle toy, which was this one right here, the one that you pop in the pizza discs on the back and then you could shoot it. Love that toy. Bought it again recently for my collection. But yeah, watching this movie in theaters is one of my earliest memories, and I remember loving every minute of it, even as a kid. And today, as a 35-year-old adult, I still love this movie so much. From the story that is so relatable, to the cinematography, to the acting, the pacing, the music. It's all perfect. It's my favorite Robin Williams movie. And I'm not sure I would say it's my favorite movie of all time, but it's definitely in my Mount Rushmore of movies that blends drama and comedy. so perfectly. Speaking of which, shameless plug here, please go watch my movie Happy Belated that is also a comedic drama. I am almost at 2,000 views, which for me is a lot, and I would love to reach that view count before the year ends. Anyways, Mrs. Doubtfire is better now than it was back then, because I give Mrs. Doubtfire a well-deserved, earned, and masterful 10 out of 10. Well, there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Mrs. Doubtfire, a movie that's an absolute classic, and is as perfect as a movie could possibly be. I definitely recommend it if you've never seen it, or if it's been a while, go watch it. But if you've seen the movie, what are your thoughts? Please comment below and let me know. And if you made it this far into the video, please give it a like and subscribe to my page and share this video everywhere you can, because I barely get views. I don't think I can keep this up. This is probably one of my last reviews. Who knows? With your help, I could keep doing this. Anyways, with that, this has been a review of Mrs. Doubtfire, just cuz. Yeah! Yeah! Dude looks like a lady! Yeah! Yeah! Dude looks like a lady! Yeah! Yeah! Dude looks like a lady! Fuck.